Workspace update. And so you've upgraded your project data, and now let's talk a little bit about Workspace update. So let's kind of begin this subject by looking at a couple of scenarios. So let's say, for example, that I've got a 1012 workspace, and I'm still using that workspace on 1012 projects. So I've got a couple of projects that I'm finishing up that are in 1012, and I get assigned a new project, and I decide, you know what, I want to do this project in 2023. So I'm going to have a 1012 version on my machine. I'm going to have a 2023 version. Would I have to create two versions of the workspace, or can I just use one version? In other words, can I start a new project in 2023 that uses the 1012 workspace? And absolutely you can. Newer versions of software can be used with older workspace. So in our scenario, I could start a project in 2023, but I could still use a workspace that's in 1010. All the DGN lives are in a 1010 format or a 1011 format or a 1012 format. Okay. So OpenRoads is designed to work that way for newer versions of software to use an older workspace. Now, keep in mind, in 2023, you may have some new tools, some new options, some new properties that weren't in the older versions, but they are designed with a default. So for example, if I bring up a tool in 2023 and the workspace isn't set up to support that tool, maybe it doesn't have a feature for that tool or whatever the case may be, that tool is still designed to work with kind of a hard-coded default. So we say, okay, if the workspace doesn't support this, then just do this, right? So that tool, that functionality is still going to be available to you in 2023. It's just not supported in the workspace. So again, the benefit of upgrading the workspace, it allows for you to customize standards for those new features and capabilities. But I just wanted to be clear that that's not a requirement. It is not necessary that you have to upgrade the workspace. Newer versions can use older workspaces. Now, note the opposite is not true. Older versions of software, you can't use them with newer versions of the workspace. So I couldn't use, for example, a 1012 version of software with a 2023 workspace. So you can use the same version or older, but not newer. So here's just a brief chart that we put together a while back, just giving you some examples. So across the top, you see the software version 1010, 1011, 1012. Over on the left, you see the workspace versions. So just notice, for example, 2023 on the top right, it can use any workspace, all the way back. It can use 1011, 1012, 1010, doesn't care. Whereas the 1010 version of software can only use 1010 versions of the workspace. It wouldn't work with later versions. So just a quick chart there to kind of make that point. All right, let's look at another quick scenario. Let's say that I started a project in 1012. I got a 1012 workspace, and I want to upgrade that project to 2023. And I also wanted to upgrade the workspace. So we upgrade the workspace, we upgrade the project files. And while I was upgrading the workspace, I decided to make some changes. Okay. The question is, how do I synchronize the changes in the workspace to my project files? And is that necessary or required? Let me answer the second question first. It's certainly, there's no requirement that you have to update standards in a file when it is upgraded to a newer version. As most of you probably know, every DGN is self-sufficient. In other words, if you do an annotation, everything that annotation needs, from annotation groups or annotation definitions, element templates, feature definitions, levels, everything is copied into that file. So that file is completely self-sufficient. It's fully functional. It doesn't, you don't have to update anything. But sometimes when you update a workspace, you may want to take those new standards and apply them to your DGN files. Let's say, for example, your baseline used to be on a certain level, and you decided as an organization, well, we want it to go on a new level. You may want to apply it to those DGN files. Now, one of the things that we get asked from time to time is, well, what's the best practice? But that's very difficult for us to give you a definitive answer. There's not really a yes or no answer whether or not you should apply workspace changes to your DGN because everything's different, right? I mean, every situation. What did you change in the workspace? Did you change a lot? Or did you just change one thing? How complete is the project? Are you at 30%? Are you at 60? Are you at 90? Are you about to go to letting? Does the workspace changes that you made, do they affect all the files or do they just affect one or two? So it's really difficult. It's kind of a decision that you kind of have to make on a project by project basis. But let's say that you decide, yeah, I want to do it. I've made changes to my workspace and I want my project files to be in sync with my workspace. So I want to apply these across the project. If you decide you want to do that, there are really 3 tools available to accomplish this, again, depending on what workspace changes were made. These 3 tools are the update standards from DGN Live, the Civil Feature Remapper, and synchronized drainage data. So let's look at each of these individually. The first one is update standards from the DGN Live. This can be accomplished very easily if you go into a DGN file. You open up Project Explorer and go to OpenRoads Standards. You just right-click on the file name, and you'll see an option there that says Update Standards from DGN Live. And then what it'll do is it'll look in your workspace, and it'll say, hey, you've got this feature definition in your workspace. You've got the feature definition in your file. I'm going to make sure that any changes in the workspace are applied to your DGN. Now, this command is designed to be run on a file-by-file basis. Okay, so you can just do it and say, yeah, do it on this file, do it on that file. One of the things that's nice to know and is what changes when you do that, what actually gets updated. So here is a definitive list for you that tells you everything that gets updated when you apply the update standards from DGN Live. Now, I'm not going to read them all, but you can just see feature definitions, element templates, text styles, design standards, survey settings, filter groups, cant tables. So there's a definitive list right there. All of those will get updated if you apply the update standards from DGN Live. Now, again, you can run it on a file-by-file basis, but what if you wanted to apply it to multiple files? Well, once again, you would do it using the batch process dialog that we showed earlier. Again, just available on the backstage under the tools. Here is the command file. If you're interested in doing that, the command is DGN Live space update space all. That's the only command you need. So you just use that as your batch file, put the list of DGNs in your batch process, kick it off, and it'll just go to each file and update from DGN Live. Once again, if you want to put optional commands in there, such as compress and file design, you are welcome to do that. Now, one of the questions that comes up from time to time is this, if I update standards from my DGN Live, is that going to necessitate any additional rework on my part? And it is possible. If when you update the standards, it forces the data to be redrawn. So for example, let's say you updated and you changed something about it, like the level or the color. In order to take that on, it has to redraw it. And in some situations, that can cause some issues. One example of this would be in survey. If you've got survey annotations and you update standards and it caused some of those elements to be redrawn, sometimes they can move back to their original location and require some rework. We will be addressing that moving of the data in a future release, but for now, just be aware that that can be a potential issue. Another tool that can be very handy when updating your workspace is the Civil Feature Remapper. Now, Civil Feature Remapper is a utility that's used to change feature definition on existing elements in a file, and it's designed to do it in bulk. So you don't have to go into files and touch individual elements and update the feature definition. This will go into the file and do it for you in kind of a bulk process. This tool is also located on the backstage under Civil Tools. You'll see an option there for Civil Feature Remapper. And again, very simple what it does. It just maps existing data to newer standards. It can work on a DGN file. It can also work on ITL and IRD files as well. You may wonder what kind of data is supported. It can update the features on terrain data. It can update the features on linear geometry and points. It can update features on corridors, on template point features and point names, as well as component features and component points. And it can do those in an ITL, in an IRD, and in a DGN. Now, you may say, well, why would I need this tool? Well, there's a couple of reasons that you may require this tool. You could be bringing data in from another workspace. Let's say you were importing an IRD from an old SS4 file. So you've got an SS4 workspace, you're bringing in the IRD file, and it comes into your ORD workspace, and it's the data. Your workspaces are completely changed. The features are, you've renamed everything, right? So it doesn't know what to do. It doesn't know how to, so everything may come in as white, or they may come in as wrong colors. And so again, this is a nice tool that goes in and updates the data. More than likely, or that's where you're going to see this, is where you just make some fairly minor changes to your workspace. Let me give you an example. Let's say in my workspace, I had, under my alignments, I created a category called road, and I had geom baseline. You may decide at some point, well, we want to rename this. Okay, so let's say I renamed the geom baseline to centerline baseline. Or let's say that I kept the name geom baseline, but I decided to change the category to centerlines. Or let's say I decided to do both, rename it and relocate it. Or let's just say I created a new feature called secondary baselines. So it's more likely it's these types of changes you're making in your workspace that you may want to apply to your upgraded project data. So when you upgrade a project, you really have two choices. You can just leave the DGN data alone. Again, we said it previously. Everything's going to work, right? That file is self-sufficient. It has everything it needs to process and run and work. The problem is that it's not going to conform to your current workspace. And so you just need to be aware of that if you decide to make that choice. But if you do want to remap those files, Civil Feature Remapper is a great way to kind of synchronize your workspace with your DGN data. Now, we won't go into very deep here today how to run this tool. I know there's some information online about that. There's some YouTube videos and stuff. But basically, it works in two ways. Number one, there's a configuration file, an XML file, and it controls what you're going to remap. It tells the application whether you want to process this against a DGN or against ITL or IRD files. And it also gives you the ability to select what categories. Do you want to do everything, for example, terrains and templates and geometry and corridors, or do you just want to do this against geometry, or do you just want to do this against corridors? So basically, the configuration file controls what will remap. Then there's a spreadsheet that controls how it will be remapped. So this spreadsheet basically allows you to go in a very simple way, say, hey, this is what my feature name was in the file. I want you to remap it to this new feature name in my workspace. So it's very simple. It lets you do some different qualifiers and wildcards and things like that. You'll notice along the bottom, you've got different tabs for terrains and geometry and corridors and so on and so forth. Again, the spreadsheet just allows you to preset what you want to map this feature to this feature. Once that's set up, you can run it over and over and over and over again on different projects, and it will go out and work well. You can use it with a batch process on multiple DGNs, just as we've shown earlier. Again, it's designed to be run within a single DGN in the active DGN. But if you want to run it against the multiple DGNs, the key in is Civil Feature Remapper. And then you just give it the path to the configuration file. That's all you do. And it will go and you can run it on as many files as you like. And as we said earlier, if you want to add other options like compress and file design, you can. Finally, there's one more tool to be aware of, and that is the synchronized drainage data. This tool looks at all of your open flows settings in your DGN Live or in your workspace and compares them to what's in your DGN or a folder of DGNs. So, for example, let's say you've made changes in your workspace, for example, in the area of catalogs or prototypes, or maybe you've changed some rainfall data. Maybe you've added a new pipe size, or you've modified a flow rate or a roughness coefficient, and you want to apply those to your DGN. This is the tool that can be used to do that. As with the other tools, it's located on the backstage. You should see a theme kind of coming through here. Just look at the backstage under Civil Tools, and you will see synchronized drainage data. This is an example of the tool itself. You can see over on the right side, you can process this against a file or a folder of files. And then over on the left, those are all your different options. You can look at the conduit catalog, you can look at the prototypes, but you can turn those on and off. You can say, I only want to apply, for example, conduit catalog changes, or I only want to apply storm data changes, or any combination thereof. So again, another tool that's very nice for allowing you to do that.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and share it with others. If you want to see more like it, please consider subscribing to this and Bentley's other channels. Thank you, and see you next time.